Well, that's the first thing. I'd like to welcome Jason and Aaron. Thank you guys for stepping up and doing this. It gets a little exciting.
Cool.
Not too crazy. So, but thank you guys, for being here first meeting too.
Thanks
for having us. Full house. Look forward to it. We've got everybody here for a call to order. If you want to do the roll call.
Okay,
We've got everybody. I'm good with it. If you're good with it,
Okay.
keep going. Everybody present.
All present.
First thing will be an approval of the minutes from last month's meeting.
Motion to approve.
I second that motion.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Only thing we've got on old business would be the subdivision regulations, which, we've talked about these, Jason and Aaron, for a long time. They have been a long time coming. Of course, the last year has slowed us down considerably, just being able to meet and things like that. I got a couple comments. Do you have anything to add before we get started?
No, I was just, the only thing is, so next month there's a lady that's starting for Mark doing landscaping downtown, and I guess she has a lot of knowledge of, sustainability, organic stuff, whatever, so I'd like to get her kind of opinion on maybe some landscaping stuff within the document itself.
Okay.
Of course, she doesn't start until August, so that might be kind of tough. But her already actually doing maintenance and everything else, I'd keep, to at least just kind of tag her ahead. She starts in August, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know her name, so. She,
Caitlin.
Caitlin? Can't remember her last name.
Starts at the end, but I don't remember exactly.
One of the suggestions I was going to say is I think all of us here except for Jason and Aaron have had plenty of time to digest this and look at it, but I want to make sure you guys are comfortable with it because this is one of the biggest things we've done since I've been on in the last 2 years now. But after talking, is this something we should finalize today and then?
I wouldn't say finalize today, just because I want to make sure that Jason and Aaron have a little bit more time to review as well. Because I mean, it's been, I think, less than a month that they've had to review it.
And I'm comfortable with that as well.
Of course, if we had any other, changes or edits.
Yeah, I've just got one thing. The rest of it, I think, from my perspective, the stuff we talked about last month that we cleaned up and updated, and I was good with that.
So we can have them look at it and then be ready to address this in August.
Yes,
August
yeah, and I'll see if I can get with Caitlin beforehand.
Give her a chance to review it.
Yeah, maybe just kind of pick her brain a little bit.
While we're on that subject, the one thing I'm glad you're here today, Mark, because you and Cody, this is a good question for both of you. The only hang up I've got on it is the requirement for a homeowner association or POA, HOA, whatever, property owners, but as a full-on requirement. And I bring that up, I've brought up a lot, and I know we've had some back and forth a little bit over, we're stuck with what to do. But I did want to I brought 2 copies of them, but the covenants that are filed for Pin Oak, because I know a year and a half ago when Buddy was still here and this got started, that was one of the stretch there on Rudy Road that needs maintenance or something. But Pin Oak has got in the covenants a homeowner association, details it, all of it and all that, but it's just, nobody's ever taken it up and there's not one form, no people are paying dues or any of that. My big hang up and it's from the business I'm in, is the requirement of it is that much more regulation on a subdivision. But we're also stuck, I totally understand, because you got Pin Oak now that's a fully built out from what's there, and there's mowing and weeding and maintenance and all that to go with it. So that's given that, because even if we were to pass this as is and the next subdivision to come through has, you can't force them to actually have a homeowners association. It can be required, but I don't know how you would force them to bring it up. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's first to admit that.
So without having something like that, what would be our plan for having that ground maintained? Because I would not advocate for the city taking on something in a private development like that.
Yeah, well, and I've seen it both ways. From my experience, the subdivisions that have a homeowner association are typically of the level that the people can number one afford it and want to pay for it to keep it maintained and the landscaping mulched and weeded and all that. Pin Oak is kind of right on the line, especially 15 years ago, Pin Oak. Because over time, everything sort of
Right.
stabilizes, I guess would be a good way to put it. And I see a ton of stuff in where cities just go mow, they don't pull weeds, they don't do that, and you get sometimes some proactive homeowners, sometimes not, which is sort of what we've got at Pin Oak. But it just gets, the sidewalks get mowed and that. Fort Smith's a little bit different. There's a lot going into Fort Smith right now that is homeowner association, and they're requiring some landscaping, like deep areas of landscaping. You're talking expensive dues and homeowner associations there. I don't know, because we're in where we've got like, you've got some subdivisions, like Country Meadows, for instance, has very little maintenance as far as the entrance or whatever, where Pin Oak's got 2 entrances and hundreds of foot of stuff there. So I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I would suggest that you disallow anything beyond an individual lot to be installed, any landscaping of any kind, unless they have an active homeowners association.
And that's a good point. If you're gonna require them to put in landscaping and beds and all that for hundreds of feet, knowing that it's iffy if it gets maintained, if it's just grass up to a fence, that's something that can be maintained a whole lot easier.
And we don't even do that.
Yeah.
If it's grass up to a fence, even if it's outside the fence, that adjacent property owner has to mow that.
Mm-hmm. Be a lot easier to enforce somebody to
Yes.
just mow other than pull weeds, replace shrubs.
Do we enforce instances like that currently?
Do we what now?
Do we enforce instances like that currently if someone's not mowed on the other side of their fence? Do we
Yes,
go and-
Does that include the right of way?
Mhm.
It does.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would assume that would be the big, get people complaining that, I don't know, why am I mowing it? It's the same story on the curb in the front, that 11 foot or so.
Right.
I don't, but that's a good point. The less it's there, the more likely you're gonna be able to keep it maintained.
Right.
But
But developers want to put that stuff in because it makes the entrances attractive. It makes people want to live there. All that's great. It's just that it can't be handed off to the city to maintain
Yeah.
for all perpetuity. We cannot do that.
Well, and for instance, Pin Oak, what I've noticed is after the storm, there's so much fencing that needs to be redone. And those are backyards of people that built to it, and that's their back fence. So if they had a dog or something, they needed fence, but the ones that don't. I mean, yeah, the city's not gonna build fences or anything like that along the way, but, just saying that they have a homeowner association that hasn't, it's just never materialized. And that's so hard to do. I mean, y'all have seen that at Eagle Crest for it. And this one's actually got written and filed versus it would be easier to start a certificate around board because you're not gonna have half of them pay dues and half of them not when you carry it. I don't know, of everything we looked at, my only personal hang up was the requirement for it. But I do think maybe an option like that, landscaping.
I would say that if there's any common area in the subdivision of any kind, that you would have to have a homeowners association to maintain it. Any common area, whether that be a green space, I don't know, anything that would require, that does not belong to an individual, but belongs to the corporate
To the
community, that they would need to maintain that.
I don't think there'd be any of that. That's not common of what's existing. That's becoming more common with development. I don't know anything offhand in Pin Oak
Right.
or
Country
Country Meadows.
Meadows has got,
does it,
Country Meadows has got common areas all the way through there.
does it?
And we actually just closed on one that had, when you go into the entrance, the very first lot there on the left, that rock part that Jim White's got,
Yes.
there's about a 15-foot common area utility easement that the homeowner that we just sold to can't fence in,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't own, but he agreed to take care of it. There's a couple of common areas
Yeah.
that nobody's responsible for,
Yeah.
and no HOA place.
Mhm.
If you go to, if y'all know where King's Crossing is, it's down there at the end of Maple Shade. As part of that development, that's obviously a nicer development, and they landscape the entrance to that significantly. And while they were working on the, selling the lots out, that was all maintained very nicely. And then once all the lots are sold, then they want to divest of it, the developer does, and then they expect the city to take all that on, and we told them we would not do that. And it's in the right of way, all that was put in the right of way. So, I don't know the answer. The answer is either you have it and you have a means to maintain it by that community or by that subdivision, or you don't have it at all. And, when that happened at King's Crossing, we told them we were not gonna maintain it, and they said, you have to. I said, no, we don't. We can go, well, it does require, this is the kicker in all this, is that the reality is the adjacent property owner is the one who becomes responsible. So if the landscaping is adjacent to your yard, between your yard and the road, then you're the one who has to maintain it. Because that's our rule. That's the existing, it's been that way for 25 years at least, 50 years probably, where it says the property owner is responsible for their property, from their property line to the pavement. They've got to maintain that. So if you've got all this landscaping out there put in for the sake of the neighborhood, then you're the one who's going to have to maintain it.
Yeah.
And that's what we told them.
Yeah, I just said, you can't use it, but you gotta mow. I've seen that a lot. What about detention ponds? And what's your thoughts on not the city retaining control of them for the fact that you don't end up with something like what's happened at Country Meadows, the one way out there, or down here at Riley, where they have been either sold to the tax sale or lost control, where somebody could alter them that would affect drainage long-term around there. That is one thing I'm seeing, is the cities are keeping control of detention ponds for that reason, just so they don't get.
Yeah, and that's kind of a mixed bag too for us as a city, in that, those have to be mowed on a regular basis. And unfortunately, we have inherited those for maintenance. Where that becomes problematic is when you have 40 of them, and then you've got all these ponds to maintain. And, I don't know what the solution is. The preference would be that if there's an HOA, that HOA pays. While they're doing the maintenance, they also pay for maintenance of that pond. And by maintenance, I'm talking about mowing it. Now, if it gets silted in and has to be cleaned out, that's something the city needs to do. But I'm just talking about, that'd be no different than if we had a storm sewer system running through a neighborhood and there was a collapsed line. That adjacent property owner is not going to fix that. The city's going to fix that. But it is the property owner's responsibility to mow the grass. And I think the same would hold true for those ponds. Is that if you had a homeowners association, they would pay for maintenance of the mowing through there. But if there's anything that had to be done to repair it or improve it, that would fall back on the city, because it's part of the drainage system.
I guess what I'm getting at is, which Pinnock has its own drainage because it's phased out, that is not complete, and there's a lot going on there. But
Right.
say Riley Estates or Country Meadows, which its detention is way, way back in the back.
Right.
But if a homeowner association, whether is required, but it never materializes, it's still gonna be left on the city to maintain, because like if Pinnock had one right there at the end of phase 2 or 3 there, there's no homeowner association that would be maintaining it currently. I just don't know how we're gonna strong arm them. I don't wanna hurt us.
No, what I'm saying is, what's happened has happened, but I'm saying going forward, I don't know that we want to take on a bunch more detention.
Yeah, I just don't know if you're gonna you can require an HOA, but I don't know how you can enforce that it forms and grows and stays solvent and current as people move in and out. It takes a special person to.
You'd probably have to use a taxing mechanism of some kind if they would refuse to do it, then there would be an additional property tax assessed for that maintenance. That's the only thing I would know you'd be able to do. And you could run that through the county.
Yeah, that's a Sean question probably.
Yeah.
If that's possible. That's all I was gonna get at was, requiring is one thing, but actually, like Pelican's got one, but it's never
Right,
materialized.
right.
So, I just don't want to see people see that as developers and think, oh my gosh, I don't want to do one and go through those, because they're very expensive to get written and filed in an LLC form and then tax returns year after year after year. I don't want to see that hinder development when it could be something, not enforceable to begin with.
Right.
So,
And maybe a property fee would be the way to do that, and you could potentially do that through the county tax program, or I don't know what other mechanism you could do through water billing somehow. Some communities have a stormwater fee, some have different other fees that they add to water billing. I'm not an advocate for that, just tacking things onto the water bill, but if you wanted to assure that, and you could do that by subdivision. That's not a hard thing to do. If a subdivision, you could have a maintenance fee added to that, a common area maintenance fee, to where if they didn't pay it, their water would get shut off. You could make it enforceable.
yeah.
It's just a matter of if that's not the best way to do it. The
No,
best
that's
way to do it is to have the homeowners responsible.
Yeah. Well, and then the city's still on the hook.
Yeah, then we're still having to hire people to
Exactly.
do that.
Yeah, the money.
The
sounds
issue
like it's
is
all
we have,
done.
we have 3 guys in our street department, and you start adding all this additional, landscape maintenance and especially if we end up with more detention ponds, it becomes too much.
They're stretched already.
Yeah, and they're stretched already. So, having a fee tacked onto their water bill, and then you hire contractors to do that, then that would be a different animal. We could manage that, especially if it was a contract.
I definitely want to make sure I'm clear that I'm not like a King's Crossing example, that the city shouldn't be pulling weeds or remulching stuff. That's not
I agree.
for a development.
I agree.
That's not where I'm just more of, if you've got from curb or sidewalk to a fence at the property line outlining a place, mower down it in the summertime is that's all I see, and it's common, but no mulching or that's.
But even the mowing part, the parts that don't have anything, but they're behind fences. You look at Column West subdivision, along Column Lane, all those fences, those are all backyards along Column Lane, right?
Mhm.
Well, those people mow them. They don't have any question about it. They just mow them. And that's what I'm talking about. It's not a problem to get people to mow grass. What becomes a problem is when there's landscaping put there.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be responsible for that. So it's not a problem to get people to mow outside their fence. I don't know.
While you're here, another question, and Cody had mentioned it on the stormwater, they talked about 2 foot above either 100-year flood or flood level, I forget the exact.
The base flood elevation.
Base flood, yes. And that was a city ordinance, the 2 foot, in there.
That was the recommendation of the state. The state,
Okay.
state ordinance specifically calls for a 2 foot
Really?
freeboard. But Alma initially had a 1 foot, and we increased it to 2 foot at the recommendation of the state. They were really pushing hard for that across Arkansas. And, you go to the floodplain management conferences, and they really are trying to get people to understand the benefit to the community, because what happens is the base flood elevation today is not going to be the same in 10 years. It's going to go up. And in 10 more years, it's going to go up more as development occurs. So in an original flood study, this is the base flood elevation, but as development occurs, that's going to go up and up and up. So what they discovered is that 1 foot was inadequate in a lot of communities. And they ended up with people flooding in houses who were a foot above the original base flood elevation. So that was the purpose behind increasing it to 2 foot. Now, the problem with that is that it creates a hardship for those having to elevate their properties or their structures on their properties. They don't have to elevate the property, but you've got steps up to your house instead of just a sidewalk going to the door. And it does cost, that's that much more fill. That's in chat, and that another couple of layers of block, you know, on the slab, and all that drives the cost. So I don't know. And what's hard is when the neighbor adjacent to you he's really at base flood elevation, and then you're required to be 2 foot above because you built a new house, and it makes your house look funny, and it you know, and it seems unreasonable at the time. But it's not about today, it's about 20 years from today. Are we protecting property for the future? And so when we drafted the 2 foot freeboard, that was a result of recommendations from the state level and for floodplain management.
That was one of the few things that changed from the old stuff, is it actually defined a 2 foot versus a foot. So,
Right.
Okay.
Now, some communities just have, as long as you're at or above base flood elevation, they don't have any freeboard. And of course, over time, they pay the price for that. The community starts getting losses. Alma has had 0 flood losses in its history. We've never had a flood insurance policy claim in Alma, ever.
That's remarkable.
But it's primarily because in the past, we kind of nobody built in the floodplain. You just
Well,
avoided it.
yeah, common sense involved with it a little bit.
And then those who did build in the floodplain and they built too low, they don't have flood insurance because they can't afford it. So it's the reason those losses are, and then we don't have any national flood insurance program losses. I mean, there's been some flooding in structures. The housing authority down here has a whole set of units that flood almost every time it rains, and they've had trouble for years, but they don't have flood insurance. So I'm not saying there's not flood losses. There's no flood insurance losses in Alma. So what that does is it affects our rating, and so we actually have a premium when you buy a policy in Alma. Of course, a lot of things that affect that is your elevation, you know. And that's the other thing. If you elevate 2 feet above base flood elevation, you get a premium on your insurance policy. You get a preferred rate. The premium is lower. So it's to the homeowner's benefit if you do elevate, but it costs more money to build though to do that.
Well, hopefully that's not an issue, just where it's at.
But I know that our city attorney Sean Brister has really expressed a hatred for the 2 foot freeboard, and it you know, it's just about, you know, is that extreme? You know, if you think this is the base flood elevation, you know, which rarely do you actually experience legitimate BFEs. I mean, usually it's quite a bit lower than that during a 100-year event. But at a BFE, you know, that's supposed to be the elevation at a 100-year event. We've had lots of 100-year events where it never gets to that elevation. But so he thinks that adding 2 foot to that is an extreme measure, and you know, there's an argument for that, obviously. And when you don't even see it ever really even get to the BFE, much less, you know, a foot or 2 foot above that. So I can understand the argument, but.
Sure, I just am curious on the 2 foot, if it was just a number, if there was more.
Yeah, it's 3 feet for critical infrastructure.
Hospitals, schools, yeah.
Fire station.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nursing homes.
Anybody else have any questions or, I think everything else that Cody, we talked about last month, I think, got cleaned up like what we had talked about.
Yeah, definitely want to make sure I got everything, because I know there was a little bit that we discussed.
Like I say, that was my only concern would be the requirement, if it's required that you can't enforce it. That might be a good strong question over the next month to see if there are options, if
a fee could be established if they didn't follow through with the organization.
Yeah. And that's a scary, I mean, that's a scary word.
It is.
Or tax, or,
It's a tax.
yeah, that's a scary word for any
That's what it
developer,
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Whether it's a developer or a builder trying to build a house or a realtor trying to sell one. So there's so much incentive, I think, you get out of that of people actually wanting to form an HOA. Because it takes a special person to be organized enough and endure the phone calls to run one.
My brother lives in Houston, and he lives in a very nice neighborhood, and they have extremely high fees each
Yes.
year. It's like $2,000 or $3,000 a year. And he was president of the organization for about 4 years, and he was the most hated person in the community, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And he got death threats. It's all kinds of things that go on, because they truly enforced, and they have about $300,000 in the bank, and they have attorneys on retainer, and they're serious about it.
Oh, yeah, your RV was parked outside of your house over 24 hours, so you owe us a $250 fee for the day.
But their neighborhood is beautiful, and it's been beautiful. He's lived there for 25 years, and it's just as beautiful today as it was 25 years ago. There's no decline. So their property values have stayed high. And it's because of that. And so they're ultimately those things do benefit the property owners. It's just hard to see that when you're paying the fees. Month after month, you're wondering, where's this going,
Yeah, well, I know the guy at the end of Big Oak that never sees the fence or the landscaping in Pin Oak, but if the guy in his backyard is thrilled to have somebody maintain it. So it's if there was an easy solution, we wouldn't be talking about it, because it would have been done 25 years ago and taken care of.
Sure.
Back in 2016, you look at a survey across the nation, there was like 83% of all single-family subdivisions. 83% had HOAs. And like 10 years before that, the number was a lot lower.
Right.
So the trend is
It's
to use
common,
it because of the enforcement act. I mean,
Right, yeah.
if you don't do it, that's really the only alternative you have. And you're gonna have corporations, any LLC corporation can go defunct, but at least you have a system that if it works, you can do something with it. And I'm like, Mark, there's probably some way to tax, if that does fall through, there's gotta be some way to put a fee or tax on it. But to me, as far as I'm concerned, I think this is the direction we have to go, because there really isn't any
The
alternative.
property has to be maintained, whether it's an HOA or individuals doing it or the city doing it. If the city doesn't want to sign up for it, individuals can't be made to do it unless we're going to tax them. HOAs, I mean, I agree, the HOA is the way to go.
It's the way to go if you can get them to stay organized.
But I think if you have it in place, then the builder can say, I'm only gonna build 6 lots. I'm not gonna have any infrastructure, private infrastructure or common areas that need to be maintained, so I'm just gonna develop that way. So it's a non-issue.
And I agree, that is the other alternative. But if we're gonna have requirements for landscaping of common areas and stuff, then you're almost demanding that there be an HOA to maintain that.
Yeah, that would lessen it a little bit. It's in here, but so many foot of landscaping per 100 foot of road frontage. It's detailed in there, but that's something that, I mean, the landscape, the mowing is expensive for a subdivision to contract out, but the landscaping is astronomical because of the labor involved in keeping it mulched and you think about your house at home where you've got 40 foot, but now you're talking 400 foot, and it's keeping stuff alive.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it becomes a bigger thing. And then if they, sprinklers go in, and then there's that water bill, maintenance on it. So I don't see us having any $3,000 a month or a year HOA subdivisions in Alma.
Yeah.
I wish we did. I wish we could.
Well, they have a pool, and they have parks, and they have in that neighborhood where my brother lived, they have quite a bit of infrastructure to maintain, but they have a median down the middle of the neighborhood that's all fully landscaped. I mean, it's a mile long of beautiful landscaping, but obviously it's relative to the neighborhood, and so I would think a couple $100 a year is what would be a reasonable homeowner's fee a year. If you look at Pin Oak, I would say $200 a year times the number of houses that are there, that'd be enough to maintain that entrance. And now we've already taken on the detention pond there, so that's not really. I wouldn't think it would be that much money. I mean, honestly, it's the fencing and the landscaping there in the front.
It's the $200 a year for any homeowner should not you know, I can afford to live here or not. It's the keeping it organized and sustained and running as people come and go. And like I say, your brother's the most hated man alive in the whole neighborhood. Who wants to live there? You're the most hated man alive. So if you see that, it usually takes a retired Army person to, I'm not kidding, they're the best one to do it. Because I don't care if they're loved or not. It's just, if we pass this today or next month or whatever, that's not gonna solve the problem long term, because you gotta have people willing to put up and knock on their neighbor's door and say you hadn't paid your dues, and if you got 6 weeks, or we're gonna file a lien on your property for $200.
Right.
It becomes, it's a tough place to be.
Yeah.
So.
You just have to, you know, an association like that to be effective, you have to have an attorney on retainer
Yeah,
all the time.
the $200 a year, pay for mowing and an attorney and certified letters and
Yeah.
court costs. That's what becomes the problem. And then can we sell houses to people in a budget for Alma
Mhm.
that are willing to put up with that for both sides?
Yeah.
That's just my concern from what I've seen. I've built in plenty of subdivisions in Alma, Van Buren, Greenwood, anywhere that have very minimal landscaping requirements
Mhm.
that, like Aaron was talking about, the people at the gate, they mow around the thing. It may not look spotless all the time, but it's mowed.
Right.
And not falling apart.
Right.
So,
Well, out at Pin Oak, you know, obviously there were some people there in the neighborhood. There was a landscaper that lived in the neighborhood, which helped. And they went out there because it had gotten out of control. And they went out and cleaned everything out and made it look better. They took a lot of landscaping out, which we didn't care.
Sure.
And that was up to them. And really where the problem came in is during the storm, the fences blew over.
Yeah.
You know, who's going to pay to put that back?
yeah. Well, and that's
It was a specialized fence too. It wasn't just a common picket. So anyway, that's the difficult stuff.
yeah. And that's, you hope there that the people would have, they've got the benefit of the fence for as long as they live there. And whether it's a subdivision boundary or not, if your fence blows over, you think,
Yeah. Yeah, I would think their homeowners insurance would have paid for the fence to be put back up, even if it was considered a common fence. It's still their fence.
Exactly. Yeah, because every house on there, they're using it as because it's on the property line.
Right.
So, plenty of subdivisions where they don't fence them, and if they leave it and people fill it in as they do.
Yeah, right.
So,
Jake, if I could interject. So we're gonna we're gonna vote on this next month and do this right. So when we vote on it, we're actually submitting it to the city council for approval.
correct, we're recommending.
Right, when this comes up, I think we need to be very clear on this point for the benefit of our city council members, because they're the ones that are gonna be at the tip of the spear with the community and the voters.
Mhm.
And so having a succinct, simple, understand message, we're trying to do this in the best interest of the citizens of Alma. What's in the best interest of this community? This is what we're doing. Just a simple communication of these points specifically will go a long way to help our city council. They'll appreciate it. Now, I think we need to be real clear to the citizens of Alma. We've gone through the flow chart and we get to stopper, at some point, it always goes back to these points. This is why we think this is the best way. I just think we need to be able to clearly, simply communicate what we're doing for the benefit to the city council on this point.
Yeah, I can mention that at the next city council meeting.
I have a silly question, but in here it says we require perimeter landscaping. Do we have a definition of that landscaping, or are we just talking about we're requiring grass? Do we have to do beds at the entrances? Is there something in here?
Not to that detail level, but Cody, is that kind of what you're looking to clear up for next month, is maybe a better definition of landscaping? I don't know if there is one, to be honest with you.
So if we offered up an option that we still require landscaping, but had an option for, say, hardscape areas like Arizona, New Mexico stuff that doesn't have to be watered, it's crushed stone, it's compacted, doesn't wash away, it helps with surface drainage, but it's less to maintain.
Yeah,
I mean, is that something we can say, you have to landscape it, but this is another option too, of a hardscape plants that don't require water, that don't.
I haven't looked into that, but that'd be an interesting thing to come.
It may be a new look in the area, I understand not everybody may like it, but at least it gives the builder
Yeah,
an option.
Yeah,
no, yeah, it's one thing to have to pull weeds all the time, but if you're not having to trim hedges or 10, 15 years down the road that are trees, that
Right,
becomes,
Right.
you know, it's something that you stayed after year after year, but all of a sudden you, overnight, it's a crepe myrtle that's 30 foot tall. So,
Hanging over the sidewalk, which is what we had at Pin Oak.
yeah,
The crepe myrtles along that fence line were out encroaching on the sidewalk. You couldn't even walk down the sidewalk anymore.
nuclear bombs are not kill them. It's unreal. So,
My neighbor across the road from me lost control of his truck a couple years ago. Came down the hill, ran over one that was there, smashed through my garage. It was awesome. And got everything pulled out. I dug the stump up and everything, because it just completely demolished it, and new one grew right back.
well, okay. Okay, Cody, anything else of what you've added? The only thing I think you added was the 50 lot for the 2 entrances.
yeah, for the multiple accesses, I put just a line that was talking about cul-de-sacs.
Was that the
Do you think the 50 lot, is that something? If they came to us with a preliminary plan and say they were gonna get 52 lots or 54, do we wanna be, depending on how the property lays, I don't know if we give ourselves any verbiage to variance on that or not. I mean, that's an odd, that would be odd happening, but you never know if you have.
I can try to see if I can look up some language.
Because you might get some people with a, you know, they might be able to squeeze 2 or 3 more lots out of a place, but if they're hard on the 50,
Right.
again,
Because I mean, it could be the same thing where they're trying to maybe cut some lots down so they don't have to.
exactly.
And, you know, it's like, well, we really think we do need more than one entrance or exit.
Well, that's a good point, yeah. They could be, well, instead of having 2, they wanted to do 49 lots,
Right.
just so they didn't have to, and they could have, but yeah. Depending on how it lays out, you could be
Right.
right there. So, and then the plat fee, we talked about that, I think that's right here, that's no problem at all. To do that, okay, I'm comfortable with waiting until next month, give Jason and Aaron time to come up to speed and ask Cody any questions, and again, thank you guys for being here and willing to take this on. So, any other questions or discussion on that? I don't know of any new business. Does anybody have any other announcements or things to add?
Today is Cody's birthday.
Well, happy birthday.
He's still hitting that.
I take a motion to adjourn.
make a motion to adjourn?
Motion have a second.
Second.
All right, motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you guys for your service.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Packer, did you make that motion to adjourn?
Set up.
You do it right.
Writing your name and second guess it.
And Chris yet?
We do have lunch for you guys.
That was just about to come out of my mouth.
Cody?
We had talked about lunch.
No, we have lunch.
I didn't see anything.
I have a sister that's 4 years younger than me. On my 30th
Now,
birthday, I have a sister 4 years younger than me. On my 30th birthday, my sister called me on the phone, knowing
Yeah, retirement money.
she's just crying hard. Like, oh my God, something like somebody died. Something went wrong. That's bad. So, okay, what's going on? And she said,
When you have kids.
I don't know what her daughter said.
Retirement's actually safe, it's all.
And like the reality that I was.
I think things are like all in my place, and it's kind of like, you turn 30 and you just start buying business.
But she
I don't
don't- I just
understand,
like-
like.
And this,
Yeah, well,
That's why you pitched the
and she,
he's like,